Yeah, Xbox is so screwed, y'all. Over the last few months, we've been seeing Xbox increase prices across the board. In part, it has to do with the current economic situation, but in another part, it has to do with what's going on within Microsoft and Xbox itself. We've seen consoles be raised in price twice over the last few months. We've seen Game Pass be pushed to the limits with its price point to the point where people don't find the value in it as much as they used to. Now, $30 a month or $360 a year. And that's just in the US, where there was a 50% price hike, whereas in regions like Brazil, there was a 100% price hike, double the price. And then there's all the mass layoffs, the studio shutdowns, the project cancellations. All of this can be traced to one source, and that is the Eye of Sauron, Microsoft. Once upon a time, Xbox was just a counting error. They were not enough of a financial money sink for Microsoft to really interfere with Xbox. They just kind of let Xbox do whatever they want. That all changed when Xbox purchased ZeniMax for $7.5 billion and Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. Microsoft put on the ring, and the Eye of Sauron directly looked at them and analyzed everything they were doing. And Microsoft wants profit. They want the investment that Xbox put into purchasing all these game studios to yield money that puts them in the green. And we all knew this. We knew that Xbox's autonomy going away as a result of Microsoft's interference is a big reason for why we've been seeing Xbox stumble into one rake after another. But now we got more specific details courtesy of Jason Schreier and Dina Bass, who released the following article published on October 23rd, 2025, titled Microsoft Pushes Xbox Division to Hit Higher Profit Margins. Now, profit margins are a thing with any corporation, but the profit margins that are expected from Xbox on the part of Microsoft are well outside the realm of traditional profit margins in the games industry. According to sources that Bloomberg spoke to, Microsoft has set an across-the-board goal of 30% accountability margins, is what they call it, a term Microsoft uses in lieu of profit margins, which is an insane ask when you consider that the average profit margin in the games industry is between 17 and 22%. It'd be one thing if Xbox was continuing to ride the Xbox 360 era wave where they were like on top of their game, but currently Xbox is arguably in the worst state that I've ever seen this platform. It is so far behind PlayStation and Nintendo in terms of market dominance in the console space that a 30% profit margin in the worst state Xbox has ever been is a ridiculous ask. Even analysts are shocked by this revelation, with Neil Barbour, an analyst with S&P Global, noting that a 30% or better margin is usually reserved for a publisher that is really nailing it, which Xbox categorically is not. As for who's responsible for this new profit margin, well, apparently it was implemented back in fall of 2023 by Microsoft's chief financial officer, Amy Hood, whose team has taken a larger role in the gaming business in recent years. Amy Hood is essentially Microsoft's plant and mole and agent within Xbox, who dictates much of Xbox's direction, given that Amy Hood is there to ensure that Xbox as a business, especially after the billions of dollars in recent expenditures, is able to make some kind of profit, and that becomes a priority rather than, long-term nurturing and fostering to ensure that they're shipping really good products with which then they can make profit later on. Amy Hood is very much about ensuring those short-term profits that will make investors happy over the course of quarterly investor meetings and financial reports. That is a priority of a corporation like Microsoft. And when you look at the timeline of things, the implementation of this new profit margin by Amy Hood in fall of 2023, suddenly the course of events over the last couple months and years make a whole lot more sense. It makes sense why a lot of Xbox executives' promises suddenly fell through. That was the initial intent, to execute on those promises, but priorities changed because Microsoft forced those changes, and now Xbox is in a position where they have to take measures that go against their previous word. So, for example, we've seen them state that Xbox-developed first-party games will remain exclusive to Xbox. We've seen that change so that Xbox-developed titles are now going to start coming out on PlayStation and Nintendo consoles as well, on competing platforms, because there's a lot of money to be made by releasing Xbox games on as many platforms as possible instead of making it exclusive to a platform and family of consoles that is way behind the competition. It makes sense why Xbox in the past said that they're all about fostering these smaller studios and ensuring that they have all the breathing room to make the best game possible and making that the priority. and why that suddenly shifted to shutting down a lot of those studios that are not producing the profits that Microsoft wants in the short term. It makes sense why studios like Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks were shut down despite producing some of the most critically acclaimed games that Xbox have ever released, simply because while those games are very good, they weren't generating the kind of revenue that Microsoft wants Xbox to generate in lieu of their massive recent expenditures. I think Xbox really shot itself in the foot by going on this mass acquisition, mass expenditure spree that has forced Microsoft to intervene, or that would naturally lead to the corporate head, to the Eye of Sauron, looking right their way. That's what's led to the current environment, whereas in the past, game makers at Xbox weren't asked to hit specific numerical targets. Instead, they were largely told to focus on making the best games possible without worrying too much about finances. That was the initial mandate, and that has now shifted since Microsoft's interference following the purchase of ZeniMax and especially Activision Blizzard. That initial mandate is what leads to long-term success. Microsoft instead is trying to rush into being as successful as Nintendo and PlayStation when it comes to producing high-quality titles that sell extremely well, even if they are exclusives. But you got to nurture that, and Microsoft is trying to skip the nurture step because they're seeing the short-term profits as the priority. And what that 30% profit margin means is that there are going to be more cuts, more project cancellations, more layoffs, because that's the only way to ensure that that profit margin is achieved or somewhere close to that. Xbox isn't generating enough money through its hardware sales, through its Game Pass subscriptions, through its various business models. And so since they can't reach those ridiculous new profit margins through revenue alone, they have to cut costs. That's why we've seen the cancellation of numerous costly projects such as Everwild, Perfect Dark, and Project Blackbird, which was going to be the new ZeniMax MMO, sci-fi MMO that they were making to be the successor to Elder Scrolls Online. These are all projects that have been in development for more than 7 years. Some were troubled and whatnot, but they showed promise and potential. But because Microsoft wanted a 30% margin, these were risks that Xbox simply could not take. As Bloomberg aptly put it here, games that are either cheap to make or deemed more likely to generate significant revenue windfalls may take priority over riskier bets. Xbox's floundering hardware division may also face a significant rethinking. So yeah, Xbox, instead of being a creative powerhouse, are ultimately end up pursuing the most generic trend-chasing projects because of that mandate of a 30% profit margin that forces Xbox to think generically and not riskily, but it's those risks that yield some of the best results. It's risks that are taken that are outside of market research that yield some of the best successes because people are getting something new, something that sets a new bar rather than revisiting familiar grounds and seeing companies try to pursue those same trends that have already been established by other bigger games. It's risk that creates unique experiences that allows you to be the first to something, and that's going to be what's going to make people gravitate towards that unique thing and make it a massive success. This kind of corporate interference is what kills the creative spirit and the identity of game studios and of a game company division. We've seen this happen with the likes of Blizzard. Once upon a time, Blizzard was incredibly autonomous, and then the Activision purchase happened, and the more Activision interfered on a corporate level, the more we saw Blizzard's creativity kind of be chipped away at, to the point where we just don't recognize them anymore. You can just feel the shift in Blizzard where their output of projects, it's just nowhere near what it used to be when it comes to the amount of projects that they would release and how creative each one of them were and how they all kind of push the boundaries. Xbox had the potential to ensure that all their recent purchases could be given the freedom to really create some of the most creative, unique projects out there, but creativity and uniqueness are risky. And so that's an area that Microsoft wants Xbox to steer away from and instead go for cheaper games or for stuff that is, recurrently monetizable or that can guarantee some kind of major revenue source, because they have to compensate for the dozens of billions of dollars that were spent in the purchase of Activision Blizzard and ZeniMax by mandating profit margins that are well beyond the norm for the games industry. And in doing so, it feels like it's just going to lead to Xbox imploding because they'll have to keep cutting costs because their revenue potential currently just cannot match that 30% profit margin. And so by imposing that 30% profit margin on Xbox, Microsoft is fucking over Xbox big time in the long term. It's going to destroy Xbox in the long term. Or at the very least, destroy their identity enough that we just won't recognize them in the way that we once used to, especially during those like Xbox 360 golden times. They're going to become a more generic game publisher that releases annualized franchises and that pursues all of the more generic trend-chasing things that a lot of AAA publishers tend to pursue, which is the last thing that I want Microsoft and Xbox to become. I want them to be creative powerhouses in the way that Nintendo and PlayStation are and offer genuine competition, because that forces everyone to make better products. And as a result, we all win. The worst thing a parent company can do to a game division is to impose unreasonable profit margins, because that means having to scoop out the soul of the company to cut costs short term to make short-term profits. But in the long term, eventually that game division will be a husk that can't make the creative powerhouse games that they once were able to do, that cannot push out the quality that they once used to, because so much of the identity within itself has been scooped out and completely eradicated. And that's where Microsoft is headed, especially with recent hints of what Xbox's next-gen plans will look like, with Sarah Bond having said that the RG Xbox Ally X handheld is an indication of what they want to pursue, which is, a premium, high-end, curated device. And that's all she said. But what she's basically hinting at is that the next-gen Xbox console could very well be a PC console hybrid. And we have seen reports of this before Sarah Bond even put out that statement. And so there's validity there that might be where Xbox is headed. And that also means that Xbox's next-gen hardware will be significantly more expensive than, say, the competition like the PlayStation 6, because it is going to be a PC that has other functionalities beyond just gaming, whereas PS6 will optimize for gaming only, allowing them to keep the hardware costs cheaper. And so there are already predictions out there based on what, for example, reliable leaker Kepler L2 believes, based on what he knows to be the chips that each respective next-gen console will use. According to Kepler 6, he believes that the PS6 and next-gen Xbox prices will be as follows. PS6 hardware will cost $600 and next-gen Xbox will cost $1,200, because Xbox, while significantly more powerful, it also has to have better components in general across the board to make it a usable PC experience. And so it has to be that expensive if this is the route that next-gen Xbox is going for, whereas PS6 can still be $600 with the AMD chip that is rumored to be used for that console. Now, these are rumors and estimates, so don't take this as, gospel. But given how expensive the Xbox ecosystem has become as a result of Microsoft's interference and that 30% profit margin mandate, I would not be shocked if there's some validity to this, or if the final results when PS6 and next-gen Xbox do launch is close enough to this. And if that is the case, then Xbox is really fucked, because, you're in third place and you have to offer some kind of incentive for people to switch over. And a next-gen console or PC console hybrid that is twice the price, or, significantly higher price than the competition that is dominating the market, isn't going to do you any favors. And then when those plans end up failing because it is just too expensive of a device to be sold en masse, and it ultimately doesn't help Xbox meet that 30% profit margin quota, the next steps will be even further cost-cutting measures on the part of Microsoft. So from the internal corruption and disease that is that 30% profit margin mandate for Xbox, to what plans look like currently, in large part because of those 30% profit margins, forcing Xbox to kind of deviate and change strategies and change course and go back on their past promises and their past intents. We're looking at a situation where I think Xbox is in extremely poor position. I think Microsoft is ultimately setting Xbox up for failure. I suppose only time will tell how all this will play out, but nothing about recent reports and recent goings-ons and recent strategy shifts on the part of Xbox and anything about their decision-making, and then with this 30% mandate report, none of it is providing any semblance of hope for the future of Xbox in the way we want this platform to be, in terms of the potential that it has to compete with the likes of Nintendo and PlayStation. And it just sucks to see what's going on behind the scenes and how much of that is really killing Xbox and being this cancerous disease for Xbox that's going to spread from within. And by the end, I don't think we're going to recognize this brand if this is the direction that they're taking, and if Microsoft's Eye of Sauron is forcing Xbox in this direction. But that's my take. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.